Hi, I'm Natalie Jill, fat loss expert turned high performance coach. When odds are stacked against us, how do we shift and create everything from nothing? How do we level up when we aren't feeling it yet or we've had a big setback? On this podcast, I'll be talking to some of the most inspiring and courageous men and women on this planet who, at their worst, learned how to achieve success greater than they ever dreamed possible, leveling up and creating everything from nothing. Tara Mackey, she was born addicted to cocaine. Her mom, she did cocaine through her pregnancy and even on her way to deliver her. Tara's dad, well, she never met him. He was her mom's drug dealer, and he was in jail when Tara was born. Now, detoxing as an infant, as scary as that sounds, it was a small struggle in comparison to what her youth and teenage years brought. She was prescribed 14 RX drugs. She was diagnosed with multiple disorders and chronic illnesses. And she watched her mom OD on heroin several times, beginning at the age of just 5. As I interviewed Tara today, she has scars on her wrist from a suicide attempt in one of her darkest moments. Now, Tara doesn't mind this scar today. In fact, she shares it because it's part of her story. Today, Tara Mackey is the founder and CEO of The Organic Life, a successful, holistic, and sustainable living platform, and is widely recognized as an activist with a tribe of over 1 million followers on her blog and social media. She founded the organic skincare company, Epigenetics, and is the #1 best-selling author of Cured by Nature and Wild Habits. Join in today and learn exactly how Tara Mackey leveled up and created everything from nothing. Today on Leveling Up, I have the accomplished Tara Mackey, who she's like that true serial entrepreneur where anything she touches, she's amazing at. She is an author. She's a singer. She's a creative, a super creative person. And she is the founder of a skincare line. And I have always seen her on social media. We have a lot of friends in common. She's got a huge Instagram following. And I wanted to know, what was her story? Like, how did she get there? How did she get so successful? She seemed to be this overnight success, which we know is really never the case. But when I started digging with her, I learned she had quite the story, quite the path. And I thought she'd be the perfect guest to have on Leveling Up. And so I'm so excited, Tara, to dive into your story and what makes you tick. Thanks for being here.
Oh my God, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to dive into this with you today.
So Tara, take us back, because if someone's scrolling social media and they see you, it just looks like you have this perfect life. You know, you're beautiful. You're a singer. You've got this huge following. You've got all the happy couple pictures. You got all this stuff going on. So, you know, the first thing somebody would think when they look at you is, oh, she has the perfect life. So take us back. Were you born perfect? What was going on?
Boy, was I born perfect. No, I was born on cocaine.
Okay, let's dive into that. What do you mean you were born on cocaine?
I was born on cocaine. So my biological father was my mother's drug dealer, and they both lived in Queens at the time. And I was like the product of like a very short relationship they had with each other. My mother was 29 at the time. My biological father was 19 at the time when I was born. And they literally, accidentally ran into each other at a bar, and I was born 9 months later. But on the way to the hospital, my biological father had been gone for like weeks at a time, and my mother wasn't sure where he was. And so she took a cab to the hospital when she went into labor with me. And in the cab on the way to the hospital, she did cocaine.
Oh my gosh.
She'd been doing drugs and smoking and drinking her whole entire pregnancy with me. But like, she had to tell the doctors, I'm on cocaine and I'm in labor. So
oh my gosh,
they knocked her out and basically cut me out of her. She just has a big C-section scar and doesn't remember giving birth to me at all. And I went through NICU, 2 weeks of detox as an infant. And my mother raised me as a single mother from there. My biological father went to jail the same month that I was born. So I didn't really have the opportunity to meet him. And my mom had the opportunity to basically say, you'll have nothing to do with her life.
Wow. So so many questions are coming up for me. So one, how did you learn all this? Did your mom tell you this stuff from the beginning? Was this a later thing? And how is that like, was your mom doing drugs the whole time she was pregnant with you? Like what information do you have more on that?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. Actually, my mom did share all of this stuff with me when I was really young. And, I heard her telling other people about it. Like, I grew up around adults. She continued to do drugs and drink and brought me to work with her and things. We barely spent any time apart when I was very, very young. So she did tell me young a lot of things that I don't think, 4 and 5 year olds should know about their upbringing
Mm-hmm.
or their situation. And I grew up a lot, I think, being around adults, and I thought it was normal to know that kind of information because that's what I was seeing around me.
Now, was it coming from a place of like remorse, like, oh, I have this, issue and I can't believe I did this? Or was it coming more from a place of like, this is just what it is and this is normal? Like, what were you interpreting about all of that?
I thought it was very normal, and I think my mother's intention wasn't really that thought out. I think she would get, wasted and needed someone to talk to, and I was there, because I was her
Hmm.
child, and there was no one else there. I'm an only child, and she's never been married, and so I think she just needed to get stuff off her chest, and I happened to be sitting on the couch.
Yeah. So when did you start realizing that this was not normal?
Um, Probably. So she overdosed in front of me when I was 6 on heroin. She started doing heroin about when I was like 5, and that took a turn. I mean, you can drink and do cocaine and relatively function, but once you start getting into really dark opiate drugs like heroin, it's very hard to hide that you have a problem. And that's what I was seeing, and various forms of neglect, whether it was like leaving me in a car to go do drugs inside of a building, or whether it was like, having boyfriends that did drugs around me. And when she overdosed in front of me, I was taught, actually, and I didn't realize why until later, but I was taught by her and by my grandparents that if anything happens to her, they used to say, if you can't wake her up, call us, don't call 911. Because I knew in school I was learning, like, if there's an emergency, call 911. And they're like, no,
Hmm.
don't call 911. And I never realized why. But the night that she overdosed, I called my grandparents instead of 911. And my grandfather came over, and he took me out of the situation. He realized she was unconscious
Hmm.
and had OD'd. And so he called 911, and then he took me out of the situation, out of our apartment. He put me in the car, and he drove the car around the corner and said, stay in here. Do not talk to anyone. Put your head down, like lay in the back seat. If anyone comes over and asks anything, do not talk to anybody. Don't roll the window down. Don't do anything. And I never realized why until later, which is that, if the cops showed up and I was there, I would have gone to foster care immediately. They wouldn't have
So
had a choice.
what was your, gosh, I'm just thinking, because as a mom, I'm trying to picture my daughter at
Oh
age
my
5 or 6 dealing with this.
God.
What were your grandparents' role? Were they enabling your mom? What was in them to be trying to keep all this a secret and protect you and not saying call us first?
Well, I think they were trying to protect me more than they were trying to enable my mom, but they were, my grandmother's still here, and I would say she's a pretty big they were both pretty big enablers. She's their first kid, and I think they just feel very guilty. She's had this problem for a really long time, and it's hard, I think, as the parents of an alcoholic and drug addict to not feel like you did something along the way, and if you could just do something better next time, maybe this wouldn't be happening.
Mm.
And so I think they carried that around with them. Once they did get custody of me as a result of her overdosing, which involved me having to testify against her in court, I started going to Alateen meetings right away, which are like Alcohol Anonymous meetings for alcoholics' children. And they started going to Al-Anon meetings, which are for like the families and friends of alcoholics.
Mm.
And I saw when we would go into meetings together that they just like I was really benefiting from it because I was young, but they had already dealt with her being this way since she was like 17. So I could see that it was much harder for them to
Mhm.
not take blame and responsibility than it was for me. When therapists would tell me it's not your fault, I could be like, okay, I mean, maybe it's
Uh-huh.
not. But I think it was very hard for them to accept that it wasn't any of their fault.
So as a kid, though, when you were seeing this, what was, because most kids, they love their parents. They no matter
Oh,
what's going on, they worship their parents. They want
I
to be like their parents.
worshipped my mother. I worshipped her. She could barely, she'll tell you to this day, she could barely go to the bathroom without me like following her in there. Like she had
Hmm.
not a moment of peace. because I was obsessed with her.
Now, was she a loving mom aside from all of this?
She's very loving. So my family who raised me, my mom's side of the family is from Ireland. Like my mom is from Ireland and came over here when she was like 13 years old. And I think also that's part of the reason why she started drinking so early, because she came over here as an immigrant and just felt very out of place for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And but she's, my grandparents come from that old school, like children don't speak unless they're spoken to, and how dare you say anything to your elders mentality. And they're not, I wouldn't say they're cold, but they're not warm. They're lukewarm. And my mother wanted to be, I think, a very different kind of parent than the parents that she had. And so she was very loving and affectionate and warm. And, I was always her top priority. I mean, that's really strange to say in the throes of addiction, but as far as like with her boyfriends or whatever, like if somebody didn't like me, they were immediately out of the picture. Or if somebody had a problem with the fact that she had a kid, like she just would have none of it. I was really, I think, when she did get better at times, I think I was a huge inspiration for that. But also, another person can't carry your wellness for you. So
yeah. So it sounds like your mom really did have the right intentions. She just had an addiction problem. So she didn't know how to get around that.
Most people who have addictions are very, very good people. It's just drugs. As I later learned, drugs turn you into a different person.
Yeah. So your biological dad in all this, he was in jail. You didn't know. Did you have any relationship with him, or was it that was closed down? So
No, I've never met him.
Okay. So you don't know much about him, or if he's still.
I mean, I do know more now because I've but I've found out about a half sister at this point who I haven't met yet either, but she's like in contact with him. So I hear vis-a-vis her maybe once a year or something.
Okay. So this happens when you're a kid. You go live with your grandparents, and then what transpires from there?
So I go live with my grandparents, and we lived across the street from my school and church and everything. And I was like just a straight A student, huge dork, like did all the musicals, did all the things, painting and dance and things that dorky kids do. And I really kind of fell into music and books and drawing and stuff and writing as a huge escape as a kid. It was a huge therapy for me. And I started therapy immediately after I started living with my grandparents and did talk therapy for many years to much, much success. I mean, I went from like barely being able to socially function as a 6 and 7-year-old to like pretty well being able to socially function as like a 9 and 10-year-old. And then around the time that I was hitting puberty, around the age of 12, someone, I'm not sure who, suggested to my grandparents that my mom, after she had gone to a rehab center for a year and had been sober for a year, and they suggested she come move in with me and my grandparents to sort of give her a chance to be the mom she was always saying she wanted to be to me. At this point, they still have custody of me, and she's like still trying to get custody back. So they're like, here's your trial period here's your daughter, be a mom. After about a year and a half, though, my mom relapsed in front of me again while my grandparents were on vacation. And did
you know when this was happening, that's what was going on?
Immediately. I'm very sensitive to her changes and her in general. I mean, it came from her, right? And my grandma specifically would always ask me, like, is she drunk? Is she okay? Blah, blah, blah. Like, they, for some reason, couldn't tell, even when it was very obvious. And I would be like, she's wasted. What are you talking? Yeah. Like, she can barely speak. Like, are you really asking me this? Right. And I don't know if they were just asking me for confirmation because they were in such denial or what. But this time they found like a gallon of, they came home from vacation. I had to tell them. And they found like a gallon of vodka under her bed. And it just turned into, even just getting her out of the house. This is detailed in my first book, but even just getting her out of the house for that was like a very traumatizing shitstorm just to get her off to a detox facility again. And so, that was broken trust after almost 2 years of, her living with us, plus the year she'd been in the facility getting sober. So I was devastated, and I really, I was very triggered because it's like, it's half my life now already since this has happened to me again. And it just happened again. Like there's no guarantee of stability here. Right.
Yeah.
Like, fuck, what am I going to do? And the future for the first time and at a very young age started to look very bleak to me. And still not legally having parents. Right now I'm getting to a point in school and doing those kinds of things, like setting up for high school, where it's becoming like very obvious that I'm a ward of the court and I don't legally have parents, and like this issue's coming up at doctors and stuff. And I'm just like, does anybody want to be my mom? Like, why can't somebody just be my mom and like not?
So, but if your grandparents had custody, were they not having rights to that stuff, or?
You have basically all the rights as a parent. It's just legally on paper. There's certain things that you can't do. Like when I applied for college, I had to apply as an independent student, as if I lived by myself and I was emancipated, for instance.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So it does come up. It starts to come up as you get older. When you're a kid, it's like maybe it comes up, but you're not involved, And once you get older, you start to realize like, well, why did you never adopt me? And it was because my mom threatened them, like I want to get her back someday if you ever adopt her, like, whatever. So, and
when you would have conversations with your mom during this point, was it her making promises that she couldn't keep? Would she say like, I'm going to get clean, or what was she telling you?
My whole life, I'm going to get clean and I'm going to get you back. I'm going to get clean and I'm going to get you back, like.
Yeah. So I'm imagining you started having trust issues.
Of course. And her painting my grandparents out to be villainous because they wanted to take care of me, not realizing the only alternative option is foster care. Who knows who I'd be living with right now, or if you'd be able to see me or any of this. Like they're giving you all of these rights that a court would take away immediately. Like you had a needle in your arm when I was 6 years old. There's no court on the face of the planet that would give you visiting rights. Like they're doing this for your benefit and you can't see the good in any of it.
Yeah. Because in your mind, you just want to be with your mom.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And for a long time, and then I think that was the first point where I was like, I don't know what the future looks like. And so that's when my grandparents took me to a psychiatrist on top of the therapist I was already seeing. And at 12 years old, I got put on my first medication, which was a mood stabilizer called lithium.
Okay.
And I was diagnosed as bipolar for having quote unquote mood swings in which, like, because it was almost like because I was still doing well in school and doing well socially and able to show up to things. And I didn't just have major depression constantly where I dropped out of stuff and couldn't complete everything. They were like, oh, well, you have to be bipolar because, you go through these depressive episodes, but then you're manic enough to get A's on all your tests.
What an amazing, weird diagnosis. Like you obviously are dealing with some real things and they go to your bipolar. Like who wouldn't be acting bipolar with this?
Right. Or even if you're just trying to do well in life still, despite it all, right? Like, isn't that a little bipolar that you can still show up and not let this affect everything in your life? Like, okay, I guess I get it. But also I'm 12. So like what 12-year-old girl isn't bipolar? Like for real. Like I hate to put it that way, but
no, it's true. My daughter's so like ecstatic one minute, crying the next. It's
like your hormones. It's like any other time your hormones go through a major shift as a woman, like that's going to be your life. That's why that happens when you get pregnant, and it happens after you give birth, and it happens when you go through menopause. Like it happens to everyone. It's normal. And so to immediately villainize it and tell a 12-year-old, and I was told this is a disease. This is like a disease. This is like if you have, cancer and you have to take chemo for the rest of your life. That's what I was told. Like you go on this medication, you can never come off of it.
Whoa. So
while simultaneously not giving me the choice of whether or not to take it. Like once you're diagnosed, they're like, this is the answer. And what are your parents going to do? Say no?
So you start taking lithium and what happens?
I start taking lithium, and actually for the first time ever in my life, after probably like 5 or 6 months, my grades started slipping, only in math and science. And I go to my psychiatrist and I'm like, what the heck? My grades in math and science are horrible. And he's like, well, lithium can actually inhibit your ability to do math and science because of and he goes into the science of it. And I'm like, why was I not told? Like, why were we not told?
Interesting. I wonder why it does that. That's very interesting.
Yeah. I think it because it's slowing down your neural connections is what it's doing. That's the point of the drug, is to quote unquote slow your brain down. And it does that in certain areas of your brain and not others. And I suppose it's the same areas that do math and language.
Wow. Okay. So now you've got grade issues.
Right. Now I've got grade issues for the first time ever. Like the worst grade I'd ever gotten on a test in my life was like a C+. Never mind, like I'm looking at a whole grade point average that's going down like a point. And I was like panicking, you know? And so his solution to that was to switch lithium from Lamictal to Lamictal, which was very new on the market at the time. Literally, if you Google it, I think I got put on it like 3 weeks after it got approved for bipolar disorder. Because it used to be used for seizures before that. And he put me on an ADD medication. So,
so now you got 2 diagnoses.
Now I'm diagnosed with ADHD. Yeah.
So now you're taking Ritalin or Adderall or one of those.
I took, it's called Metadate.
Okay.
Which is like one letter away from methadate. And that's how I felt on it. I'm like, you just gave somebody who was born on cocaine and has never had a stimulant since they were an infant, who had to go through detox after they were born, a stimulant to voluntarily take every single day.
Yeah.
He's like, and I've always been very thin, like tiny. And it was like, I'm freaking 12 years old, 80 something pounds. Like, what are you doing? Like,
right.
What are you doing?
And you don't know because you're 12 and you're trusting the doctors and your grandparents and everything else. So
you're paying them a lot of money. Yeah. I mean, if I paid somebody $150 an hour for their time, I would do what they told me to do.
Totally.
You know? Like, my grandparents did not have a lot of money. My grandma stayed at home, and I think my grandfather made like 40 grand a year, which in New York does not go a long way. So, you know, they were already struggling to like pay for this. Yeah. They had to see it as the best possible care, or else like, what are we all doing here?
Totally. Okay. So you're taking these, your personality, I would imagine, is changing.
Oh my God. Well, number one, so my sole comfort in all of this is writing and music and drawing. And I'm taking this ADHD medication now, which I have to take every day before school. And I go to audition for these shows, and in the middle of the audition, I just started like shaking and like panicked and like ran off stage pretty much. And it was actually my voice teacher in high school that took me aside and was like, this is not you. What is going on? You know, because I was so used to just taking the blame for everything that I was like, oh my God, this is all my fault. Like, I didn't even think it was the medication. I didn't really know what it was. She sat me down and she's like, I saw you audition a year ago. I've seen you in like 6 different plays. Like, I've never seen you choke like this. Like, this is insane. What is going on? And I would just get so nervous and so panicked that I couldn't like function. And she's the first person who told me, like, nothing is wrong with you. Something is wrong with that doctor. Like, why is he putting you on all these drugs? And I was like, no, they said I have to take it. Like, and she took my best friend aside in high school and talked to her about it and was like, can you talk to Tara's parents and like, or her grandparents and like tell them that she doesn't need to be on this stuff because it's really hurting her.
So what did you do? What happened from there? Did you get off the stuff?
I refused to take it anymore. I refused to take it. And that's actually when he finally switched my lithium to Lamictal. It was almost like okay, now you're being really defiant. So we're going to switch we'll take you off of this, but we'll switch your bipolar medication and like double your dosage.
And then what happened with the ADD medicine? Did you keep taking that?
No, I just stopped taking it.
Okay.
Luckily. Yeah. But then I started having really bad arthritis pains all of a sudden. Once I came off that, I started to have these like weird side effects of like being in pain constantly. So I got put on medication for arthritis.
Yep.
Then I got put on medication for pain. Then I got put on medication for depression.
Oh my gosh. And all of this was somebody who has a genetic disposition and was born addicted to drugs.
Born addicted to drugs. Both my parents are drug addicts. People telling me, literally doctors telling me your chances of becoming a drug addict are 100% if you ever do drugs.
And now you're basically getting prescription street drugs.
They have my name on them. They literally have my name on them. When you fulfill a prescription at a pharmacy, it has your name on it. So why would you ever think it's a drug? I mean, that's a lot of what I write and speak about now is like, you know, you pick these things up at a drugstore and somewhere along the way, you're tricked into thinking they're medicine. They're not medicine. They're drug.
Yeah. So, oh my gosh. So you're taking at this time bipolar medicine. You're taking medicine for the arthritis, which I'm imagining some kind of strong NSAID was going to mess up your gut.
It was Vioxx, which was taken off the market for killing people.
Yep. So you're taking Vioxx. Okay.
Yep.
So super high levels. It's and then you're taking now an opiate, I'm assuming, for the pain. Okay. So three really serious things that are all working against or with each other in weird ways. And I'm sure your personality is changing, and now you're already exposed to drugs. So what happens then?
It'd be so funny if it wasn't so true. You know, I just kind of kept taking drugs, and I went to college, but I ended up actually dropping out of 3 different colleges because I couldn't like function. I would just like be in pain, or I just felt like I wasn't really ever anywhere where I completely belonged. And I think my depression got worse and worse because I was taking these drugs and I wasn't actually seeing any of the effects from them that they tell you you're going to see. Like I would take these mood stabilizing, I just did hand quotes, drugs. And I would feel worse. I would take these pain medications and I would just like get nauseous. I would take anti-anxiety medication, and once it wore off, I would be more anxious. Like I was like, what is going on? I mean, something.
So you're taking that also, that's a 4th drug. So it's like a Xanax or something on top of it all.
Right. So that I ended up getting prescribed those on and off too.
Gosh.
And then by the time I was 24, I got a bunch of what I did instead of like, I was in school and I got a job at Cornell and I started working there and going to school at night. And I realized after I passed all these aptitude tests and worked in healthcare and like, that's what I wanted to do. I studied genetics and I did biology and it's just like a huge nerd. I realized that like, I don't need to really go to school for this because I don't want to be, I realized very early on in working with patients one-on-one that I didn't want to be a doctor because that grossed me out. And, but I knew I wanted to work in the lab, and all I needed to do that was get all these like certifications. I'm like, I don't need to spend all this money going to school. I just need to pass all these certification tests. So I started working at Cornell and I dropped out of my last college. And then I worked for, a small environmental lab analyzing asbestos samples, super glamorous job. And, in January of 2011, I got a call from one of my very best friends that one of my other very best friends, it was like a trio of us, had taken her own life. And at this time I was on 12 different drugs already. All prescription. I never in my life have taken a drug that wasn't prescribed to me ever.
Did you know taking 12 drugs that this was not normal? Or did you just think this is what happens? Like everyone does something like this.
I figured, at that time, right, I've been on drugs I was 24. I've been on drugs for 12 years. And I just figured this is what happens over time. I'm going to need more and more drugs because more and more things are going to be wrong with me because like I'd already, you get convinced at a young age when you start taking drugs at a young age that something is wrong with you. And so when people keep telling you, well, now this is wrong with you and this is wrong with you. Like I got diagnosed with I think I was on 2 separate drugs just for fibromyalgia. Like I was on 2 or 3 separate drugs just for pain. And one of them was fentanyl.
Gosh. And every single thing of every drug you were taking was causing another symptom somewhere.
Of course. And because I never got to take a step back, I never really saw the connection between all of that until this whole cascade of events. So my best friend takes her own life, and she had struggled with depression and being diagnosed as bipolar as a child because of trauma and things like that. And that was not dealt with. And she was one of the smartest people I knew. And I'm like, maybe she knows something I don't know. I really started. And then I got put on my 13th and 14th drugs, which were Valium and Xanax.
Holy moly. I've never met somebody on 14 drugs. I mean, that's just, you were 24 years old on really a broken healthcare system to be doing that.
Right. And you know what, Natalie, you have met somebody that's on 14 drugs. They just haven't told you because it wasn't like I was going around telling people I'm on 14 drugs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you were around me long enough, you'd realize my purse rattles like pills. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I have 3 or 4 or 5 in there, but like I'm always astounded now when at my book signings and speakings and stuff, when people come up to me and they're like, I'm on 20 prescriptions or my daughter's on 12, or I'm like, what? Because you can't see it in people. You know what I
No,
mean?
and I shame on these doctors that they think that's the answer.
Oh my goodness.
I absolutely believe that pharmaceuticals, there's a place for it, but I don't know on what planet that would make sense.
No, and I'm not, and I'll, when we get into this part of my story, you'll see I'm not anti-pharmaceutical drugs by any means. I'm not on that crusade. I know a few wonderful, amazing people who are doctors. Kelly Brogan, for instance, Dr. Kelly Brogan, like she's just like, hey, there's alternatives. And that's kind of my message too, is I want people to know that there's an alternative, that if you don't have to go on this at all, and there's another solution, and it's not going to hurt you, and it's not going to cause a side effect that enables you to need another drug, like try that first, because if somebody had told my grandparents when I was 12, well, instead of doing this mood stabilizer, why don't we give her some GABA or some 5-HTP or some St. John's wort, or why don't you take her out in nature like once a week, any of those things would have, I'm sure, really helped before they tried. And then I don't think they would have needed to try drugs.
Yeah. So where did street drugs affect you at all? Was that ever coming up for you on top of the prescriptions? Like, were you ever tempted by alcohol or other drugs because of that? Because so many times the prescription can be a gateway to those things.
It's really funny. No one's ever asked me that before, but it did come into play really early. The first time I drank alcohol, which I've never said on any podcast before, the first time I drank alcohol was at 14 years old. And, it's not like I got into it and I like started drinking or anything, but that seemed, now I think about it, I'm like, that is awfully young. Somebody, because most people in my hometown knew, I live with my grandparents. Like everybody knows why I live with my grandparents. And so the fact that somebody took me to a party at 14 and was like, here, try a Mike's Hard Lemonade, was like, that could have led me down, a really bad path. And I'm a huge advocate for cannabis now, but I remember like the first time a bunch of people around me were smoking weed and passed me a joint. I was like 13. Like, what? And luckily I just passed it to the person next to me. I didn't even say anything, but like, and I avoided marijuana for so long because I associated it as an illegal drug that was going to hurt me and put me in rehab. But yeah, like that stuff is out there, and it scares me as like a future parent that I'm like, God, if I did that when I was 13 with everything I saw, what are kids doing?
So I wonder if you were able to escape the whole, those prescriptions being a gateway too, because you didn't want to turn into your mom, because the alcohol and the marijuana were one thing, but like that heroin and that cocaine, that's so scary, that could have been a whole nother.
Totally. And I've never done like any I've never done cocaine. I've never taken acid. I've never done like anything that could like fuck me up. Like I basically just like smoked weed. Like I've tried mushrooms and nothing happened. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm not supposed to do that, But every other thing I've stayed completely away from because it's just like not worth it to me. I know what it can do to someone's life. And I've been offered cocaine I modeled for like a few years when I was 18 into my mid 20s. And like I was offered cocaine, I can't even tell you how many times, and being in the music industry too. And I was just like, no. And now knowing people use these pharmaceuticals, use Xanax and stuff to like do that, it's like, okay.
So when did you realize that this is not working for you? This is a problem. How did you, and what was going on, and where was that transition point, and what did you do?
So like 2 months after my best friend's funeral, I also tried to take my own life. I got into just a really bad place. Like I was in a very abusive relationship with, this is all outlined in my first book, with somebody who, had tried to kill me, that I had like a restraining order against. And just I was at a job that, I'm not going to be analyzing asbestos samples forever. You know what I mean? Like maybe one or two of my coworkers are great, but this is not a long-term plan. And I had a lot of toxic people in my life. And, clearly my best friend was depressed enough to commit suicide. And it just brought me to this place of like, I was hopeless. And once I attempted suicide and that didn't work, I realized that I have two choices, really,
How do you attempt suicide and it not work? I'm curious about that. Was it?
So I have scars on my left arm that will tell you the whole story. And I actually have a post about it on Instagram, because I used to try to hide them for a really long time because I was ashamed of them. And also when they were new, it's like, I don't want people to think I did this yesterday, you know? But people ask me now, am I going to get a tattoo over them or whatever? And I'm like, they are the tattoo. They tell the whole story. They tell the whole story of how, you know, I fought this battle against myself and I won.
So you slit your wrist, and what did somebody find you? Did you wake up and call 911? What happened?
My ex actually showed, it was the craziest thing because we hadn't talked in like forever. And I don't know what tipped him off or whatever, but like he just showed up at my house and he had a key and he came. I remember I was in the bathroom and he came in the bathroom and I had like just done it. And I was so like numb and almost like catatonic. Like I was just like waiting, you know, and he was like, oh my God, what did you do? What did you do? And he like just started wrapping up my wrist and my arm, because it's like all down my arm. And he was like, we can't take you to the hospital because they'll put you in a psych ward and you don't have health insurance and like all this shit. And I was like,
oh my gosh,
you know, and I'm just sitting there like not saying anything, just staring at my arm. And I just realized like, oh my God, I thought this was going to do something.
It was going to end it all, end the pain.
Yeah. And I feel no different at all. And that's when I realized like this is not the solution, right? The solution is, it's not that I want to end my life. It's that I want to end this life. Wow. I want to wake up and do what I want to do. Like I want to wake up and make myself and the world better this day and every other day. Like the reason that I'm here is because I lacked hope, not because I'm depressed. Like that's a story I'm telling myself.
Wow. It's super powerful. So,
I mean, go for it.
Did you, so you had this awakening essentially. What happens then to start realizing, okay, I really have to start changing, or I have to stop these prescriptions? How did you correlate and connect those?
That was the thing. It was about finding the toxicity in my life, right? Like once I really, the next day, I mean, I really dove into the work immediately and I started going, what's not working here? Like I need to, and I started writing it down. Like I need to just start writing down everything that's led to this point and isn't working. And by the way, when you've got scars like that on your arm or fresh wounds like that are stinging and they hurt and you have to redress them every day, like it's a pretty good reminder that like you got to get your shit together if you want to have a different life. Because I started to realize if I wanted to have a different life, like I needed to have a different mindset. And if I needed to have a different mindset, then I needed to act differently. And if I wanted to act differently, then I had to believe in everything in a completely different way than what I had believed before. I had to find a way to look at the same situation and see it totally differently.
And that's amazing that you did that. How did you figure that out? Did somebody tell you this? Did you read it somewhere and then it was making sense? Did it just come to you?
So that initial thought, honestly, I mean, so I grew up listening to Tony Robbins and watching Oprah and stuff. So that stuff was in the back of my mind, but I hadn't read a self-help book and I can't even tell you how long. You know, I'd mostly been reading like science and psychology books because that's what I was doing for a living. So, but I knew really in the back of my mind, even what I had done so far, right? Even like how much I had accomplished from the day I was born, like what I'm sure the doctors who delivered me thought my future was going to look like versus what it was already, I think, testament enough that like, you don't have to live this story everyone thinks you're going to grow up and live. And that really inspired me to start making different choices. And once I started making different choices, like, and made a commitment to cutting that toxicity out of my life, which is when I realized number one, that the pharmaceutical medication I was taking was the most toxic relationship in my life. It was the underscore to everything else. It had led me in the direction of relying on finding these people and these bad coping mechanisms and these bad habits. And so my intention when I first came off all my drugs, cold turkey, which I do not recommend anybody do. I could have died so many times. And I went through 3 years of withdrawal, which I don't recommend. If you do it the right way, you only have to deal with it for a few weeks. If you do it my way, good fucking luck. So, but I came off them all cold turkey and in my head, not knowing number one, what I was about to face withdrawal symptom wise, but also like anything else, I was like, oh, I'll just see, you know, what I need and what I don't need. Once I'm off all these, I'll like go back on some of them if I feel like I need them. Right. And once I made that decision, um, it became very, very clear to me who was in my life because I was taking drugs and who was in my life because they actually wanted to be around me. And it turns out like 99.9% of the people were around me because I was taking drugs and I had this bad mentality, and, you know, they wanted to be there too. Misery loves company. And it became very easy to kind of leave room in my life for new friends and new people. And these new friends and these new people that I'd met through doing things I hadn't done in a long time, like going to a recording studio that I hadn't visited in like 10 years and just walking around and saying hi to people and like, you know, making music and asking people if anyone needs a singer for their band. Like it led me to people that did give me books that changed the rest of my life. That was the first time I ever read The Alchemist. That was the first time I ever read The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. That was the first time I ever read Autobiography of a Yogi. And once I started letting those kinds of thoughts into my mind, books literally started falling off the shelf to help me heal naturally. Like I'd carried around these books on natural healing for years, but I'd never opened them because what the fuck? I mean, they're not relevant to me, right?
Totally.
And then I was like moving a bookshelf and like literally this book on natural healing fell open to a page on turmeric. And I pick it up. And of course, one of the things I am still facing after I come off all my drugs is like, I'm in a lot of pain. Like I was taking fentanyl, by the way, plus 2 other painkillers. And I'm not taking anything. And so
plus all the inflammation and gut health issues I'm sure you had from all the drugs.
God, so many gut health issues. I started drinking a lot of kombucha and making this like mushroom tea I found on Amazon. That was amazing and great for gut health. But I'm dealing with this pain every day. And I'm like, this is excruciating. Like, I don't know if I can go through this for the rest of my life without drugs.
Where was the pain in the arthritis? That's where you're feeling it?
I have arthritis like in my back. Yeah. So it's mostly there. And because I have scoliosis. So it's just like the misshape of my spine just pushes things where they're not supposed to be. And when they flare up, it's like it feels like everything's very even tighter than normal because some of it's in a tighter spot than it's supposed to be.
So how long was the journey from that realization and that moment to getting off all of the drugs?
I started coming off my drugs like that week. And I came off, I remember stopping the Lamictal first. And then within that same week, I had stopped absolutely everything.
And did you tell your doctor you were doing this or did you just stop going?
No. I just stopped going. I mean, I was at this point, I'm 24, right? I'm like, I have my own health insurance. I'm not seeing, and it wasn't great. I mean, it was like state health insurance. It wasn't my job or anything. It was like Medicare. And I started, you know, just seeing like these random doctors in Queens who didn't give a shit about me. They weren't going to follow up on some girl that came in from the social services office. You know what I mean? So it wasn't a big thing to just kind of like stop going. Okay, cool. Like I don't have to sit in a doctor's office again. Great. Because guess what? I've spent like a quarter of my life in there. And it felt like a huge relief that I could take over my own health. I don't know if I immediately started seeing it that way, but it became pretty apparent to me after a few weeks that that's what it was. And I like to tell people that I made the decision twice. So the first time I decided I'm going to come off cold turkey, and then I do. And it's the second time, it was a few weeks later. And it was when the withdrawal symptoms started getting really, really bad. And pharmaceutical withdrawal symptoms are everything from like nausea all day long to like blurry vision to like I'd be driving and like I'd just kind of be like, wait, where am I driving to? Like you just get this brain fog that's like I'd look at a counter and be like fork. And it would like take me a second to like figure out. And the fork would be like right in front of me, but it would just, my brain wasn't like connecting words that I'd learned with like objects I was seeing.
That's really, and I hope everyone listening really picks up that she did not recommend doing this without doctor supervision. This is just her journey and her path.
Do not.
That there are doctors that can help people slowly get off things if that's what you would choose to do.
Absolutely.
So when did you start feeling better and what did you start learning?
So, I mean, I honestly started feeling better, like, I don't want to say immediately, but like in the first month, like, you know, it's interesting because when you say feel better, like I was throwing up like 10 times a day. And then it got to the point after about a year where it got worse. Like I was throwing up like 15 times a day and I couldn't like control it. And there were times where I felt like I couldn't breathe. And I was like, I'd get through the day and be like, I don't know how I didn't die. Like I literally, there was a point there where I wasn't breathing for like a minute because I was like throwing up so much and I couldn't catch my breath. And keep in mind, it's like, this is just, I'm not, I'm changing my diet and I'm changing the people around me. And I, put I told my job that I was going to quit, but I told them like, I'm not going to quit tomorrow. I'll find a replacement and whatever, I'll quit over time. And then I met somebody who was going to move out to California and asked if I wanted to move out with them. And this story is in my book and it's so beautiful. It just so happened to like align that of the two people I reached out to on Craigslist about their place, one of them got back to me and was like, I know you. And I was like, no, you don't. I don't know anyone who lives in California. You're crazy. And she was like, no, I do. We did dance together when we were 5. Like, you look exactly the same. She's friends with my cousin still. She's like, I sent your cousin your picture to make sure it was that I was remembering right. And she confirmed it was you. So like, come move into my place because I'm moving back to New York. And your cousin is helping me move into my new place in New York. And I was like, okay, fine, universe, I'm listening. Like, I guess I'll take a road trip to California. So I did. I took a road trip out to California. And that's, I feel like, when things really started to pick up and change in a big way for me. And there was really like absolutely no turning back.
Wow. It's amazing. What's your relationship with your mom now? Or do you have one with her?
I do have a relationship with her now. It's good. She's great. We see each other, when I go back home, we text a lot. She's in a good place. She's doing pretty wonderfully. I think she's just still kind of in a place of forgiving herself. I think I've forgiven her more than she's forgiven herself. And so we're working on that.
Has she been sober?
Yeah, she has. She has. Yeah.
That's amazing. Mm-hmm. And do you have any desire to ever get to know your dad or no?
No.
So what inspires you to do what you do now? Because now you're a tremendous leader and you've got a big following. What do you think inspires you to do that? And what do you think drew people to you and created that following?
I think in the beginning, so what inspires me is I'm here. I know I love your podcast name because I really honestly feel like I'm here to level up people's consciousness, and create a path forward in the consciousness of humanity. And what was the second part of the question?
Well, so that's what your purpose, what drives you to do that? And what do you think attracted so many people to you?
Okay. So what drives me to do it, is I honestly feel like everything I've been through, like to me, it's like, what is this all for? Unless it's for the greater good, for healing other people. Like if I just went through this myself and I never shared it. And I think that's what draws people in, is that I've been very vulnerable in sharing a lot of these things. And, I don't have to talk about any of this stuff. I technically didn't have to. Like I got my book deal because when I moved out to California, I started my blog and my publishing company actually reached out to me based on stuff that I had been blogging about, but I hadn't been blogging about any of this. Like other than my family, like 4 people in my entire life knew my mom did heroin or that my grandparents had custody of me. Like I'd actually spent a long time trying to remove myself from that narrative.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until they talked to me on the phone after they pitched me, the book deal. And we were talking on the phone about it. And they're like, well, what are you comfortable writing about? And I started to kind of tell them a little bit of what we've touched on today. And they're like, Tara, you have to write a book about this. Like who the fuck cares about like kale chips when you can be writing about this? Like write this down if you want to. Like we're not pressuring you.
Yeah.
Like you could do like a recipe book, or you could do like a book on why you're here and why you're doing this. And then you could do a recipe book 5 books down the line, that's actually like got a story behind it, because people need to know. And then my editor came to me while they were still pitching to me. And this is actually a huge part of what really inspired me to write the book. She said, we've looked into it. And number one, other than Kelly Brogan, who I mentioned previously, there's not a lot of people who write about the dark side of pharmaceutical drugs. And this was in 2014. I mean, it's a lot more headlines now, but she's like, but the thing is, we can't find a single solitary memoir on anyone who's come off all their drugs and replace them with something natural. So that's actually like my expertise. So I came off of fentanyl and I replaced it with turmeric and skullcap and ginger. And it actually worked. Like I would take fentanyl and get nauseous and get no relief, because it turns out I'm opiate intolerant, which is not surprising. And I would take a tea that had these spices in it and tasted amazing, by the way, and actually find relief like an hour later, not be in pain and not be in pain for the next 8 or 9 hours. And I was like, this is what people have to know about this. There's no way.
So Tara, how did you discover your interest in biology? Because I know that was a big thing. And how were you able to make that like so much more, meaning build a business and whole brand around biology?
Oh, right. So I started by studying psychology in college, and then I would get together with my two best friends, and one was studying biology and the other was studying chemical engineering. And I would hear them talk and I'd be like, I really like this stuff. And then they kind of caught on to that, and they started giving me like presents for Christmas and my birthday that had to do with biology. And I was like, ooh, I think I like this more than I like psych, because there's hard answers here, right? With psych, it's like, it's kind of, for me, it always seemed a little like, it's always, at the end of the day, it's someone's opinion.
Yeah, it's like conceptual. It's like a, yes. And it's esoteric. Subjective. Yeah.
Right. And biology to me was like, oh my God, there's real answers to all these questions. Mm-hmm. And that really intrigued me. And the first book that one of my best friends gave me was The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins. And it was the first science book I'd read that was kind of written the way that I write. And I was like, oh, you can write science books like nonfiction kind of. And they're really interesting. And I was like just digesting all these wonderful facts about science. And I realized I really like this subject. I really like genetics. Like, this is my thing. So I kind of like instantly switched. And then I started studying biology with a concentration in epigenetics, which is environmental genetics. So the idea that everything that happens in your genes is based on your environment. And at the time when I started studying it, it was like, there was one documentary on it. You can find it on YouTube actually, and Neil deGrasse Tyson's in it, and he's like super young. Okay. And it's like a 12-minute documentary about epigenetics. And I watched it, and I like read some books, and it was like sort of a new concept at the time, and I was super interested in diving into it. And so that's how I got started there. And then the way that, it did break my heart to have to drop out of school. Mm-hmm. But I couldn't afford it anymore, truthfully. And then once I started getting jobs in these fields and realized I didn't really have to go to school to get the jobs, I was like, why am I doing this? So my skincare brand, Genetics, is not only named after my former major so that I still get to do it, right? But also because it's science-based. Yeah. So
talk to me about that. Like, how did you, because you were already doing so well with your books and everything you're doing, what brought you into the skincare? Because it's a whole different business really within your business. What brought you into that?
Whole different business. So like first of all, every herb that I mention in my books pretty much that helped me tackle like psoriasis, acne, inflammation inside and outside is in my skincare. So there's that connection. So I discovered them all kind of simultaneously. And when I came off of my drugs, that included coming off of birth control. And once I did that, my skin just went nuts. And I was having really bad nodular cystic acne for months and months at a time. And I'm like, there has to be some sort of solution to this. I went to my dermatologist and she said, well, your acne is clearly hormonal. Here is minocycline, which is an anti-inflammatory drug. And the scientist in me was like, how is an anti-inflammatory drug going to deal with hormonal acne? If I want to deal with hormonal acne, I have to take my hormones. So I never filled the prescription for the minocycline because I knew it wasn't going to do anything and except build up antibodies that I didn't be building up in my body.
It's just always treating. That's because that's what so many doctors do. They just treat like the symptom. They don't treat the cause.
Yeah, it was so crazy to me to hear that come out of her mouth in one sentence. You have hormonal acne. Here's an antibiotic. I was like, as a scientist, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, it's so common though.
So common.
So the ingredients in your skincare, what makes it unique? What makes it different?
So like my glow brightening serum, for instance, we have turmeric, we have chamomile in there. We have oils and herbs that actually brighten.
But natural ingredients versus using like hydroquinone or the other stuff that are.
Right. 100% natural ingredients, no fillers, no toxins, no anything, no water, like literally no fillers. It's all organic oils and herbs. And I don't use essential oils in my face care, my serums for your face, because I feel over time it can actually be irritating. We're not really supposed to be putting essential oils on our face in any concentration. And what I also noticed is that there was no real place in the market for that. Like I looked before I started my serums, I looked through my beauty cabinets, which had nothing but, years and years of organic and as natural as possible makeup and skincare in it. And I turned them all around and read all the ingredients, and every single one of them, the only thing they had in common is they all had essential oils. And I was like, there has to be an alternative out there for people who are sensitive to this stuff, because I imagine that's why so many of the reviews I read on the skincare and some of the experiences I had for myself is it would work well for 3 months. And then all of a sudden my skin would break out or have some sort of reaction. And I'd be like, what is this from? I've been using the same products. I don't understand. I'm eating the exact same way. And I think it was the essential oils, because once I stopped using any skincare with essential oils, when I was doing the test batches for my face serums, like my skin instantly changed overnight. The enhancement oil, or breast, butt, lip enhancement oil, is all science-based. Every single ingredient does what we say that the oil does. So Zimu, for instance, is a Chinese herb that retains fat anywhere that it's applied. So if you're applying an oil that has an herb in it that retains fat anywhere it's applied, and you're applying that to your breasts and your butt and your lips every day.
Now I understand your Instagram post. I was like, what is she doing? She's putting this stuff on her butt saying it's making it better. I didn't understand. Now I get it.
It does.
Easy. I might have to try this stuff. Okay, I got it.
It really works. Yeah. And there's no fillers. There's no anything. And I know it's like a crazy concept, but if you really think about it, if you're massaging this oil with these active ingredients only in these places.
But let's stick to butt and boobs, right? Because we don't want it.
Right. No,
don't put it on your stomach.
Boobs, lips. No.
Yeah.
And it's, I think about it like, it's like manipulating any other muscle in your body, right? Your body responds over time. If you give yourself a massage anywhere, day after day with our method, like it will expand and respond.
I love it. I love it. I love so much how you turn like so much pain into purpose. It's just it's so brilliant and so incredible to watch, because your life could have gone in such a different direction. And I just commend you for what you did and how you speak up and teach others now and share your gifts so much. I think it's amazing. I do have a question for you. And this is, most of my listeners here, they listen for motivation. They listen for inspiration. They want to shift themselves up to the next level. So if somebody's listening right now, and this is most of my audience, they're going through their own personal rough time, or they don't believe that they can get to the next level. Maybe it's the setbacks you had years ago, whatever that is, whatever their personal setback, whatever they're struggling with right now. If you were to give them some advice on how they could level up and create everything from nothing, what would you tell them?
That's why I wrote my second book, Wild Habits, The Wild Method: Willingness, Intuition, Love, and Discipline. You have to be willing to recognize that something that you've been doing is not working. And that's why you're in the place that you're in. You have to be willing to recognize that. That's the first step, or you will never move forward. You have to have the intuition to, once you recognize that, ask yourself where you want to go and what the next step is to get there. You have to have the self-love then to implement what you've discovered through your intuition, because that's where it all stems from. We self-sabotage because we don't love ourselves enough to actually give ourselves what we deserve.
So good.
And then you have to have the discipline to get up and do that day after day after day until it becomes a natural thing for you and you don't have to think about it anymore.
Amazing. I love it. Tara, where can people get your books? Where can they find you? Where can they learn more about your skincare line?
You can get my books wherever books are sold. You can follow me at Tara A. Mackey, and you can get my skincare line at Genetics with an X, organic.com, or just Google Genetics Organic. It's on Amazon, and we're in Walmart.com as well.
So awesome. Thank you, Tara.
Thank you so much, my love.
Thanks for leveling up with us today. Please share this episode if you found it helpful so others can join in. And don't forget to hit that subscribe so you don't miss out on future shows. And if you would leave me a 5-star review, I appreciate those so much. I read all of them, and it's how I know that I'm giving you information that you find valuable. And come interact with me over on Instagram at Natalie Jill Fit. I read all the direct messages and comments over there. Make it a great day, creating everything from nothing.